Okay, if everybody's ready, we'll get started. Okay, before we begin, this is a reminder that this is a remote meeting and teleconference using Zoom pursuant to 1 MRSA Section 403-A. Welcome to the Sanford Planning Board meeting for January 5th, 2022. This meeting will come to order. This is a public proceeding, and unless the board specifically votes to go into executive session, you have the right to hear everything that is being said and to look at all the exhibits that are offered. Please notify the chair if you're unable to see or hear something. Please note that any planning board members that have any potential conflicts of interest of which they are aware, they will disclose the conflict prior to the board initiating hearing or action on an application. After the board votes on the merits of each project, it will vote on written findings of fact. Since the findings may substantially affect any appeal rights, and also as a matter of courtesy, the board asks that those attend the meeting not leave until the board has adopted the findings for the project you are interested in. After the board makes its final decision, any reconsideration by the board must be made at its next regularly scheduled meeting. If anyone wishes to appeal the board's final decision, he or she must do so within 30 days. The city's ordinances and comprehensive plan are available for viewing on the city's website and in the Planning and Development Department's office at 919 Main Street in Sanford. Remember, this is a public proceeding. You have the right to hear and see what is happening, and we welcome public participation. And I guess we can start with a roll call for attendance.
Hi.
Hello.
Diane Conley.
Present.
Oliver Jones.
Present.
Jack McAdam.
Present.
Tom Morgan.
Is
Tom here?
Tom is absent with notice.
Excused with notice. Yep.
Crystal Tenney.
Here.
Lenny Horr.
Present.
And I don't see Joe either. Is that correct?
I don't see him on there.
Okay.
He may be joining us later.
Okay.
Okay, that brings us to the next item on our agenda. This is the election of officers. And we'll start with the position of chair of the committee. I'll entertain a nomination for chair of the planning board.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to recommend or elect yourself, Lenny Horr, for chair.
I would like to second that nomination.
Okay. Just need to hold a roll call vote.
Okay. Diane?
Yes.
Oliver?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Crystal?
Yes.
Lenny, do you get to vote?
I don't know. That's a good question. Do I?
They did it last night at council. I don't know if it's for us too.
Yes, you do get to vote. You get to vote on yourself because you get to decide if you want it.
What if I vote no? I guess I can
Well,
still
then-
be out. I could be outvoted
Yeah.
though.
You're outvoted.
I'll vote yes, I guess.
Okay. Then you're elected.
Congratulations.
5-0.
Thank you. All right, here's to the next 12 months, I guess. Okay, so that brings us to vice chair. I would actually like to nominate Jack McAdam for vice chair.
I'll second it.
Okay, and a roll call vote.
Diane?
Yes.
Oliver?
Yes.
Jack?
I guess so.
Crystal?
Yes.
And Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Okay. So we have a chair and a vice chair.
Yeah, congrats, Jack.
5-0.
Okay, so the next position to fill is secretary.
Mr. Chair, I'd like to elect Oliver, if he is so willing.
I second that nomination.
Okay, and a vote for secretary.
Are you okay with that, Oliver?
Why not? I'm all for it.
Thank you.
Okay, Diane,
Yes.
Oliver,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Crystal,
Yes.
Mr. Chair.
Yes.
Okay, 5-0.
Okay. So we filled all the positions. So that brings us to the next item on our agenda. It's the adoption of the planning board. Am I looking at the right one here? Planning board bylaws for 2022.
Mr. Chair, Mr. Chair, most of the proposed amendments are minor, editorial, updating a few things. Probably the most significant items are on page 2, lines 28 and 29. Clarification about the deadline to notify the chair and planning director about not being able to attend a scheduled planning board meeting. The recommendation is that the notification, unless there's an emergency, you're sick, some other sort of thing that comes up at the last minute, to notify the chair and the planning director no later than 2 p.m. on the date of the meeting. That would give us time to notify applicants and board members in the event that the board won't have a quorum or only 4 members in attendance, so everyone can plan accordingly. The second more significant element has to do with, let's see, it's specifically referencing the use of video teleconferencing pursuant to state and local, state and city council policy. And that is on page 5, lines 4 and 5. And then probably the most significant change or addition is on page 5, lines 44 through 46. Addition of language regarding the chair's discretion to request that board members justify his or her negative vote on a development application based on standards approval. It also clarifies when in the process of voting that request may be made, and that would be after the votes are taken and tallied. So at the end of that, the chair may then ask folks who voted in the negative to explain the reason for their vote. We had this come up over the course of the past year. And a number of the board members who've been on the board for multiple years, most of them predating me, pointed out that in fact that was the policy of the board. It just was never captured in the bylaws. And the one change beyond that I suggested is talking about when in the voting process that question or that request can be made to avoid even the appearance of attempting to influence a vote. I did go over this in detail with our city attorney, as well as discussion with the MMA Legal Services Branch, and this is entirely appropriate. In fact, can be helpful, particularly if an applicant or somebody with standing chooses to challenge the board's vote in court. That the justifications for the no votes would be right there on the record. Just a reminder to everyone that also in the bylaws, under the ordinance and state law, state regulation, your denial of your vote to deny an application needs to be based upon one or more of the standards associated with the review of that application. That language is already in the bylaws. Beyond that, one other significant area is page 9, lines 18 through 25. There's language that added that now makes it clear that the bylaws are also applicable to the Design Review Committee, which is a group appointed by the planning board. The assumption always was that the same rules would apply to them, but this now would make it explicit. Apart from that, as I said, it's mostly editorial and date changes and that sort of thing.
Okay, I agree with the change on the timing of the vote till after everyone has voted to ask that question. I agree with that. I think that's a good change. I like that. Any discussion on that?
I agree with you, Letty, but I have one question, if I may.
Yeah.
How does this apply for building? I was going to say building an ordinance. Working over ordinances, new ordinances.
Ordinances are different than development applications. The board does get involved in potentially in policy matters there, although not in all cases when you're working on an ordinance. In some cases, the city council may have worked out the policy direction it wants, and it sends it on to the planning board because that's what's required if you're going to change to the zoning ordinance. But I think that was primarily intended to apply to development permits. Let me see now. Let me look at page 5 in the bylaws directly and see if. Excuse me. I'm sorry. I am.
Yeah, I know you're not feeling well. I'm sorry, but I wanted to clarify something before.
Yeah, I think that's appropriate. Let's see, what line did I say that was on? At the chair's sole discretion, the board members who vote to deny a development application may be asked to explain the basis for his or her vote. So it is not talking about the ordinance side of the story.
Thank you very much.
You're welcome.
Okay, if we're all good on the bylaws, I guess we can vote to accept.
We need a motion.
Okay, I'll make a motion to accept the planning board bylaws as presented.
It's all about second.
Oops, just gotta turn your mic on, Jan.
Diane?
Yes.
Oliver?
Yes.
Yes.
Jack? Crystal?
Yes.
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
5-0.
Okay, we've adopted the planning board bylaws. Let's move on to the next item, adoption of the 2022 calendar. I don't think this year there are any conflicts on any holidays. Is that correct?
Correct.
First time I can remember that happening.
Right.
Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion that we accept the calendar.
This is Crystal, I second.
Okay, and we just need to vote to accept.
Diane?
Yes.
Oliver?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Crystal?
Yes.
Lenny?
Yes.
5-0.
Okay, moving right along, the minutes for December 1st, 2021. I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion to approve, Jack.
Second it, Diane.
Okay, and a vote.
Diane,
Yes.
Oliver,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Crystal,
Yes.
Mr. Chair,
Yes.
5-0.
Okay, and that brings us to hearings and business. The Pepin application is going to remain tabled because we're still waiting for a complete application. So we'll see what happens in the future.
Yes, you will see this item on the Site Plan Review Committee and Planning Board agenda for the next meetings, the 18th and the 19th.
Okay. And other business. Anything under the planning director's report for tonight?
Just one item. Last night at the City Council meeting, the council approved the appointment of Tom Morgan, a reappointment of Tom Morgan for 3 more years to the Planning Board.
Okay, and that's all.
That's all.
Okay. Next item, communications. Does anybody have any announcements that they would like to make? Any comments? Okay, I'll just say one very quickly. Thanks for letting me be chair for the next year. I'll try and do a good job. All right. Is everybody else is good? If we are, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn so we can go to a very brief work session.
Motion to adjourn.
Second, Crystal.
Okay, and a roll call vote.
Sorry, Diane,
Yes.
Oliver,
Yes.
Jack,
Yes.
Crystal,
Yes.
and Lenny.
Yes.
5-0.
Okay, our formal meeting is adjourned, the shortest meeting ever. Okay, are we waiting for the streaming to stop? I don't know if it's still running, but
Ben, if you're still with us, you can cut the stream at this point. Yes, we are still streaming.
okay.
It looks like you stopped it.
You did stop? I see something. I see Council Chambers still on the screen there, so.
Do you?
Yep.
Unless
there's two of you.
Oh, no, it's for you though. Yeah, I just tried to text Ben, but unfortunately, it wouldn't accept my sending him that text because I didn't have it formatted right. 207-215. Let me try it one more time. 215-3989. Try that. Okay. I sent him the text, so he may very well start it, do that, but if you want to get going, we can just get going with this. I'm going to indicate that the meeting ended at 6:50.
Sounds good. Yeah, we're ready for the
Yeah, that's what I had.
retail sales, adult use marijuana.
Okay, so, excuse me. Thank you, folks, a number of things. And I guess I just want to remind the public that this is a work session and that you are not allowed to speak on this topic or any other topic unless you are invited to do so by the planning board. The opportunity for the public comment will be at the public hearing, which hopefully the board will authorize scheduling at the end of this work session. So the City Council has requested that the planning board review a proposed draft amendment of Chapter 280 zoning to allow retail sales of adult use marijuana, to conduct a public hearing on the proposed amendment, and to make a recommendation for consideration as part of the amendment process. So what you saw in your packet was a draft amendment that was prepared in response to the City Council zoning subcommittee work for about, I think it was several meetings, probably about 6 to 9 months ago. There are other amendments that will be proposed for chapters 120 fees, 149 licensing, and chapter 161 marijuana. None of those three chapters require review and comment by the planning board, so they're not on your agenda. You're welcome to look at them. The framework that was adopted by the zoning subcommittee and generally endorsed by the City Council is to continue to treat the industry no differently than any other industry, albeit with standards that are unique to the land use, just as it has done over the past 6 years of preparing marijuana regulations. To build off the framework that was already established in the ordinance for sale of medical marijuana, and that was offices, and cultivation of both medical and adult use marijuana. And that framework includes limiting eligible marijuana properties for adult use sales, retail sales, and those are already designated to those that are located in zones that currently allow retail sales. So of the 8 marijuana properties, there are 3 zones that allow retail sales: the urban overlay zone, 1 contract zone, and the industrial business zone, but only for 2 parcels. So in the urban overlay zone and the contract zone, retail sales are a permitted use. In those 2 parcels in the industrial business zone, retail sales are a conditional use. And the rest of the zone does not allow retail sales of any sort. So you can see, you can look at the ordinance amendment for a listing of the parcels that fall within this framework, as well as descriptions and a spreadsheet that included additional information about each of those properties. So the 2 properties in the urban overlay zone include 9 Renaissance Drive. This property, and this is the old off-track betting property. And you'll remember that the planning board has approved marijuana cultivation and manufacturing as on that property, as well as potential designation of an office for the distribution of medical marijuana. This property has access to Main Street via Renaissance Way, which has immediate access to Main Street. So when the site plan was approved for this property, it was designed with the intent to provide for marijuana, adult use marijuana retail sales at some point if the city allowed it in the future. There is also some additional area available for expansion on the site, although it's relatively limited at this point because it's largely was planned and built out. The second property is 27 Hancock Lane, and this property also has direct access to Main Street and has some additional area available for expansion on the site. The other property where it's allowed is in the contract zone. This is at the stone mill. Access to this site is either through the length of the mill yard or via Emery Street, which is flanked by residential neighborhoods. In addition, there is limited area on the site to accommodate additional parking to support a retail sales use. There is a vacant parcel immediately across the street from the mill owned by the same property owner, and that might be a reasonable location for parking to support this use. Then the two properties that allow retail as a conditional use in the industrial business zone, one of them is at 22 Smarter Drive and the other one is at 12 Smarter Drive. There is some additional development potential on each of the two parcels. However, traffic associated with retail sales on these properties would be drawn into the heart of an industrial park. Generally, it's not a good idea to allow retail in an industrial zone, and the comp plan specifically calls for limiting commercial encroachment into the industrial area in order to preserve land for industrial use. Furthermore, both the conditional use and site plan standards focus on traffic safety, access, and parking, among other items, which any business would have to meet, as well as other standards associated with the conditional use and site plan. There is a medical marijuana office on the 22 Smarter Drive property. Please see proposed language requiring a traffic impact study for retail sales of adult use marijuana on these properties. And then the last piece of the framework is that the City Council would require an annual license for each retail storefront. What I'm suggesting as a process for review and comment in response to the City Council's request is that the Planning Board hold this work session on the proposed amendment of Chapter 280 immediately following its formal meeting today, which is in fact what's happening. And then if the Planning Board is comfortable with the draft after the work session and directs me to do so, I will advertise a public hearing on the draft amendment for the board's January 19th meeting. And then following that public hearing, I will revise the Planning Board's recommended amendment of the language, if any, and prepare a report on the board's recommendation to the city manager. After that, the zoning subcommittee will continue to review and make recommendations regarding the proposed amendment of the other chapters, as well as the Chapter 280. The most significant issue for its consideration, based upon past conversation, is the amount of the proposed annual license fee. Planning Board won't get involved in discussing that. So that's pretty much it. As you'll look at the draft amendment, it's a pretty straightforward set of changes. Hold on a second while I try to get them in front of me. If you want to kind of walk through this with me, on page 1, lines 13 through 15, is where the specific properties are identified. This is in the definition of licensed marijuana properties, and it goes on to specify which of those properties would allow adult use retail sales. There is a new definition of marijuana retail store. It's a combination of the language out of state law adjusted to reflect Sanford's approach. Then if you continue down on page 1, you'll see under the standards for conditional use approval on lines 43 through 45, specific reference to it's expansion of the language that's already there around traffic impacts, looking at traffic impacts to include not only you know, turning radius and stuff like that, but also looking at the volume of use, in other words, the volume of traffic, any reduction in levels of service, any need for infrastructure improvements, including but not limited to intersection traffic controls. And then if you continue to page 2, lines 1 through 5, is where you see the language saying that if you're going to propose a retail use in the industrial business zone, that you have to undertake a traffic impact analysis to assess the development impacts on level of service, safety on the street network, and improvements that might be warranted to mitigate impacts. It has to be prepared, just as all of our traffic analyses do, by a Maine licensed professional engineer and conform with the Maine Department of Transportation rules and regulations pertaining to traffic movement permits. The majority of the remaining changes are very minor. It specifically adds marijuana retail store in several places, and in several places it eliminates the restriction, it expands what is currently talking about medical marijuana to expand the discussion to include marijuana retail stores. So those are the kinds of changes that you'll see going on the next several pages. And then the last set of changes are in the, let's see, here we go, still scrolling through, in the site plan review section, in the section that calls for supplemental information, is on page 4, lines 41 and 42 start this section. It's supplemental information for marijuana production facilities, and the insertion now includes marijuana retail stores. And then the language is pretty much the same until you get onto page 5, and then you'll see on lines 8 through 13 supplemental information for retail sales in the industrial business zone, and then it again repeats the requirement for a traffic impact study. So it's pretty straightforward. As I've explained to a number of industry reps who are not particularly happy with the policy direction in this amendment, the policy was laid out by the City Council Zoning Subcommittee and then presumably largely endorsed by the 4 councilors who were in attendance at the meeting where they voted to move this to the planning board. And so unless you choose to challenge the policy direction that the City Council has laid out, this is a relatively straightforward administrative function to make sure that the ordinances are written clearly. So I leave that with you, but basically what I've been saying to industry reps is by all means come watch this meeting, participate in the public hearing once it's scheduled and held, but the appropriate place really to challenge the policy direction is really in front of the City Council. That's pretty much all that I have to say.
Any discussion or comments from the planning board?
Mr. Chair, I have a few questions.
Okay.
When the director was talking about Hancock Lane, she didn't specify which building. There's, what, 4 buildings in there?
It could be on any of them.
Okay.
If I remember correctly, I believe there's even a small amount of property undeveloped that could be developed for an additional structure.
Okay. I know it's probably not in our purview to talk about it, but all I'm thinking about is enforcement and how the council did the 180 from 2 years ago talking about retail marijuana. These are questions I want to know that I can't get answers to.
Yeah, and I'm not sure that I'm the appropriate person to respond, Diane, but I can say that there have been changes in membership. I think there have been some changes in experience with the industry in the city. Clearly, the state took a pretty dramatic step in opening up opportunities for retail sales, and a number of communities both surrounding us and more far-flung have adopted the opportunity for adult use retail sales, and I think a lot of folks, I don't know whether this went into the council's considerations, have observed that the sky has not fallen. And in fact, a number of communities have been able to operate allow these kinds of facilities to operate. And they've been able to, the municipalities have been able to manage the enforcement issues. And I know that that the council is very interested in, as I mentioned earlier, the amount of the license fees, potentially bringing some additional revenue into the city to assist with enforcement and educational opportunities. Beyond that, Diane, I'm afraid you're going to have to talk to the councilors yourself to get an answer.
Okay, thank you.
I've got one question. Are we looking at just the 3 sites that you mentioned off Main Street, or the additional sites in the industrial park as well?
Yeah, it's 5 sites.
So it's 5 sites, not 3.
So the 3 that would be permitted as of right, retail sales as of right. 2 in the urban overlay zone, 1 is the contract zone, and then there are 2 in the industrial business zone that would be conditional uses. So they would have to prove their case as any conditional use that they meet the standards.
I'm not so concerned with the Main Street sites, but if we're not allowing other retail in the industrial park, are we okay to allow this in the industrial park?
Well, the zoning subcommittee felt that it was.
Okay.
I argued long and hard about those 2 issues at the zoning subcommittee meetings, that drawing that retail traffic into the heart of the industrial zone, and then the language in the comp plan discouraging retail intrusion into the zone because there's very precious industrial land. There's not a lot of it. But I believe that at least the zoning subcommittee and tacitly with the direction from the city council to send this on to the planning board, that they believed that the process would take care of any of those concerns. They did see the language about the requirements of the traffic impact analysis.
Okay. Other comments from the board?
So does that mean any business in the industrial zone can also do retail which
No.
is a conditional use?
No. So and Jack, you were probably around when this happened, Lenny and Diane as well. I was not. When the city council agreed to the contract zone for Walmart, they also designated, and I know Jamie's here, Jamie Cole's here if you want to talk with him about this, and Alex Horr. They also designated, I think it was like 7 or 8 properties that pretty much were along the roadway that led into the back way into Walmart to allow them to have retail sales. They did that as a conditional use, not as an outright permitted use. So it was going to have, each of those properties would have to prove their case. Of those 7 or 8 parcels, 2 of them fall within the licensed marijuana property. So the retail sales would only be allowed for adult use marijuana and only on those 2 properties. And they would be conditional uses.
You're saying they would have access off the Walmart right away?
No, I think they come in from Main Street through the industrial park. But I
Okay.
think there's a back route there into the Walmart.
So this would be the entrance. You're talking about the entrance between the Tractor Supply store and the Rome America plant?
Yeah, I again, Lenny, I'd have to pull up the map to take a look at that. I'm
Okay.
sorry, I'm not entirely clear on that. But again, Jamie and Alex may be able to answer that question for you.
If you could.
Hi, Lenny. This is Jamie. Sorry, I do not have a camera on this computer. So what the access road actually is Smarter Drive, which is the road right past what was last Shaker Pond Ice Cream.
Okay.
And then Route 99 is past it a little bit. So it actually wasn't at the exact time Walmart got their contract zone. It was actually a year or two later.
Okay.
And it was actually to allow a business where Shaker Pond was to do retail. But there was a zoning amendment to allow retail sales in several of those properties right at the beginning of Smarter Drive, of which these two properties that are allowed marijuana, currently allowed marijuana production and manufacturing, could potentially be allowed retail sales if this zoning amendment goes through as presented.
Okay. Oliver or Crystal, any comments?
All my questions are already asked already.
That's funny. I was just about to say the same thing. Jack, actually, I had the same question that he did. So it was already answered and addressed.
Okay. Diane, did you have anything else to, to add to that?
Well, it's not relevant.
Okay. Go ahead.
2 months ago, we heard from counselors at a public forum who wanted to say in their comments that was published in the paper, the local little paper we have here, about how they wanted not or did not want to see a lot of them within town. And I want to know, I see 5 here, and I wonder where that thinking went. Again, those are questions for the council.
So, and my understanding was that they were intent in keeping it out of Sanford downtown. So if you think back to 2 or 3 or 4 amendments ago, I think actually the first time through when the ordinance was put together, that the uses were limited to the urban overlay zone, which starts south of the Sanford downtown. So it's consistent with that past decision. There were some recommendations from some of the industry people, industry representatives during the zoning subcommittee conversation to actually shift away from that framework. And there was a suggestion that by allowing it in the retail center, that actually would bring the traffic to a place where traffic would be desirable for retail sales, and that could actually provide some attraction for folks who might come there to go to other retail spots in the downtown. But the city council zoning subcommittee held pretty firmly that it should not be allowed in the downtown, and they settled on initially looking at the 8 properties where marijuana was currently, where marijuana was currently allowed, and added the option, the additional consideration that was the starting point, but then to look at the underlying zoning, and that's where the restriction on properties that were not in a zone that allowed retail sales prevented those from being carried forward. So they've been pretty consistent in that position for a long time.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
I'm just surprised the Stone property wasn't included in that recommendation.
It is. Oh,
Yes.
to keep it out of there? Yeah, that one was a little trickier because if you think, because it is one of the designated 8 properties, and the actual contract zone language allows retail sales on that property.
But not in this proposal.
No, it is allowed.
It is allowed, okay.
It's proposed to be allowed in that proposal. The tricky
Okay.
part for that particular property is going to be
The parking.
traffic and parking. Yep.
Yeah, okay. All right. Any other comments or questions on this? Or should we try to wrap it up? Okay, I'm not hearing anything, so maybe we should wrap this up and we'll get one more stab at it anyway at the next meeting. Is that correct?
Yeah, so the thing I'm looking for from you this evening is, are you okay with me advertising this for public hearing on the 19th?
I am.
Yep.
Yes.
Want to make that a motion, Lenny?
Yeah, make a motion to have a hold a public hearing on this at our next meeting.
Oliver, second that motion.
You're up, Jan.
Diane?
Yes.
Oliver?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes.
Crystal?
Yes.
Lenny?
Yes.
Okay, 5-0. We have a public hearing on the 19th.
All righty. Is that all we needed tonight, Beth?
That's all we needed tonight.
Okay, so I guess I'll make a motion that we
Motion to adjourn.
Oh, Jack's got it. I'll do the second.
Okay.
And one more vote to adjourn.
Crystal.
Diane?
Yes.
Who's next? Oliver?
Yes.
Jack?
Yes, ma'am.
Crystal?
Yes.
And Mr. Chair.
Yes.
There you go. 7:21 p.m.
Okay, we are adjourned.
Woo-hoo.
Fantastic.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year, everybody.
Happy New Year, everybody. See you later.
Thank you.
Feel
Have a good
better,
night.
Beth.